G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, I have joining me back in the studio, big Mr. Shaved Head Jimmy Ibrahim. Mate, you've kept the look, You're back up for another month.
Well,
the hair is still shaved. What do you reckon? The
Sammy,
head.
once you go the shave look, you got to maintain it.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, you could grow it back out.
Probably could.
How long are you going to keep it bald for or shaved?
I don't know. What do you reckon? How long? What do you reckon?
Well, I would have said don't cut it again, let it grow back out. But here we are.
I reckon a couple of months it'll grow out. You got to go through that uncomfortable, awkward little period.
I think you own it for a little bit as well, and then I've had
down.
I used to have the shaved head for years.
Might double down on it, Sammy.
Double down.
It's actually quite stupid to do it in winter. If you're going to do it, you probably should have done it in summer. But
well, I mean, you're heading to Europe, so it's okay.
Yeah, I thought, why not? So
Why not, mate? Why not?
We'll go for it as long as we can.
What about the fact that your facial hair, your beard, is actually denser and longer than your head?
Yeah,
How does
that is a problem as you get older, Sammy. One that you may encounter very soon. So I'll remind you of that.
Are you saying that I may not get older and I just might be dead, or just
no?
Who knows?
Who knows, mate? I've noticed a couple of grey little whispers.
Whispers? What do you mean, mate? I'm
creeping in on your noggin. So
mate,
don't be.
There's plenty of salt in this pepper.
So,
mate, you've got an episode you wanted to cover. You and Mr. Brendan Gagan
Yes.
on the front line. Head of education being Brendo.
Yes.
Yourself, I don't know what your title is. Token semi-shaved head guy. With hairy face. Mate, you're wanting to cover something today. You have brought the ammo. You said, mate, bring nothing.
Yes.
We have put the questions together and you're going to hit me with a bunch of them.
100%. Now, as you know, Sammy, on the discovery calls, both myself, Brendan, and Liam, we do a lot of the intro calls for clients. And actually noticed, I was speaking to Brendo the other week, and Liam actually, we've noticed that there's been quite a lot of new first-time clients coming in.
Okay.
And the conventional theories about property just keep coming up time and time again. Now, our community, they know a lot of the messages that we talk about, the strategy, so they're a lot more educated. We did a myth-busting series. But we thought just for a lot of the, doesn't matter where you're at in your journey, but especially for the first-timers, we thought it would be really good to come up with some key points around why everything we've been taught about property investing is wrong. And that leads from your parents, in the media, and just to be mindful of those things.
How many things have you got to talk about?
Quite a few.
So this is a bulky myth-busting session.
Yeah, we're going to punch through. I'm going to bring up a bit of the topic.
Would you agree? It sounds like it's a bulky myth-busting session.
It is.
Okay, so you've taken away the ability to do a myth-busting series. Continue. Okay.
Well,
shaved head, bit of an ego, bit of an agenda now.
We just mix things up a little bit,
Okay.
And also for the sophisticated investor out there or the experienced investor out there, it doesn't hurt just to remind you of these messages. We often say, like you think about an elite athlete, it's not as if they train differently every week. They'll rehash a lot of the skills, a lot of the things over and over.
Yes.
If you're a tennis player, you practice your serve. You don't change your serve every month. You just keep nailing it until it just becomes second nature.
Yes, I feel you.
Right? So I think with this kind of with investing, it's the same thing. It's all about reiterating the same messages.
Yes.
So
Consistency is key, my friend.
100%. So I wanted to run some of these by you and get your thoughts on them. And you being the expert, clearly you would be able to help a lot of our first-time listeners.
Okay, beautiful. Well, mate, let's dive into it. Let's see what you got.
And the first one, Sammy.
First capital for the round.
One of the most common things we've been told by our parents in the media, rent money is dead money.
Did this come from the episode that we did when we caught up last month and I impromptually bought said primary residence?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of first-time listeners calling up saying, well, Mum said, rent money is dead money.
Now Sammy's
Get
saying-
into the market. Get into the market. Even though Sammy's bought his dream house, maybe I should do it as well. The government's throwing out the first home buyers grants. There's so many incentives for me to get into the market. I can come in now with the 5%. The government's going to give me 15%. Why am I going to spend money on rent?
Okay.
What's your thoughts on that?
Man, the whole idea of like the rent money is dead money scenario, man, it's so outdated. I remember my parents hit me with it very early in the piece as well. I used to get hit with it all the time, literally as a teenager. So it is very much a long-held Australian belief that I think is passed down through the generations. It's the grandparents saying it to the parents, parents saying it to the kids in our generation now. But yeah, man, my honest belief is that it's an uneducated comment because it comes from a place of it's an uneducated but well-meaning comment. It's coming from a place of you should buy your own home and then pay it off over time so you've got some financial security of your primary residence. But ultimately, if you're listening to this podcast, you're undoubtedly trying to upskill yourself to be able to go out there and build yourself a property portfolio and create financial freedom through property. And I think when that is the case and you genuinely are trying to bed in and dig in and go hard and build a property portfolio, the idea that rent money is dead money is just uneducated. Again, well-meaning, but it's not going to serve you in the purpose of building a property portfolio, which is what we're here for. So yeah, man, like I firmly believe that the idea of rent vesting is an extremely strong and powerful strategy to enable you to help build a portfolio, keep building a portfolio. So I'm a massive believer of it. And I firmly believe if you are wanting to invest and create that financial freedom for yourself, then you should throw that statement, and that belief out the window, out the door, and focus on a rent vesting journey. Or if you can live at home longer, if you guys are young, if you can live at home longer, if you're single and you can, share a house or something like that, the rent vesting scenario, though, strategy, where, if you're a bit further along and you got a family or whatever, the power of it, man, is extremely strong, especially when you understand how to strategically continue to creatively borrow money as well. It's an extremely powerful weapon you can have in your arsenal to build a portfolio, retain borrowing, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. What would you say to the young people out there getting seduced with the new government incentives that they're going to chop in 15%, you're going to pay 5%, you're not going to pay LMI?
Man, I think like you're very close to a 10 to 12% deposit as it is, to go out there and buy your first investment property and build it. And I think the really important thing to note is so many people, if they're wanting to buy where they want to live or buy something close to home or close to work or in a capital city, it's most likely going to be quite an expensive asset. So by doing so, yes, you might have that 5% deposit to help you get into that. But could that be a 10 or 12% deposit for an 88 to 90% lend to go out there and buy your first investment property and scale your portfolio?
Yeah.
What you have to remember is your ability to release debt, from a primary residence with a 5%, and then the guarantee of the government of the 15. We don't actually know how hard it's going to be to release equity from that point. Are you going to be able to release equity at all? That hasn't been solidified yet, and I don't believe it will be the case. It's to help people get into their first home and own that first home.
Yeah,
get their foot on the ladder, not to help people from an investment perspective. So I think in reality, man, like a lot of the time, if you were looking to buy in Sydney, I think it's up to $1.5 million. I think a lot of the states, capital cities, it's very high hundreds of thousands, if not up to $1 million. And I think like if you take that into equation and then look at, okay, well, what about something for $400,000 to $600,000 or $400,000 to $700,000 that I could go and buy as an investment property, get my foot on the ladder? You're undoubtedly not that far away deposit-wise plus stamp duty from being able to go buy a great investment property and then leverage the equity back out to then go and buy another one. So if you're serious about building an investment portfolio, the 5% deposit scheme and government guaranteeing the rest, it's not going to help you on your journey.
Yeah. And you brought this up on the previous episode. Rent money is dead money if you're not going to actually go out and invest.
1,000%. Yes.
So make sure you got to be active. You got to be investing.
Yes. If you're just going to go buy your first home, and you might have friends and family and everything that are talking about doing it, and they may just be wanting to go get some financial security for the family. If they believe that's what that is, go buy the primary residence, focus on paying that off, instead of renting, going and doing that. That's fine. But if you're listening to this, you're undoubtedly wanting to invest.
Yep.
I would stress test the idea of going down the investing route, the rent vesting route instead, and what that potentially could do for you as a secondary cause.
I love it. All right. We nailed that one. Next one. Capital growth is king.
Okay.
I'm only investing for capital growth.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, man, it's like you can't do one without the other, and at the end of the day, you can't eat capital growth, right? Yes, you could sell a property off. There's some people that talk about refinancing the equity and then using that to live off and just constantly be living off equity releases. Man, it is crazy. It's also extremely dangerous. Let's throw that into the equation as well. Like if you're purely living off equity, what happens if the market tapers off, goes backwards, goes stagnant for 10 years like most markets do? Where are you continually getting the equity to keep moving on? So man, I think it's one of those things. It is a terrible strategy, terrible dangerous strategy we'll throw out there for one. But that's off that strategy, okay? Now, the idea around capital growth is king and it's the only thing you should invest for is silly, because at the end of the day, man, like I said, you can't really live off it. It's something that like you need cash flow. You need cash flow to provide that long-term passive income stream. Now, the beautiful part of cash flow and ensuring that you have cash flow assets in the portfolio that you own at the back end of the portfolio is almost always as an absolute minimum. And if we look at commercial property, for example, almost all leases are structured with a CPI, so inflationary number. So either CPI or 3% to 5%, or whichever is the greater. That's how most leases in commercial are structured. Let's say it's $100,000 a year net lease plus annual increases of 3 to 5% or CPI, whichever is the greater. So that would be, based off whatever that CPI print comes in at the end of the financial year to then be used towards the increase in lease for the next year. And my point around that is your cash flow would continually grow in line with inflation as a minimum, if not more. So that, like, let's say you own a property, you own a portfolio for 10 years, use your capital growth deals, they might help you get into some cash flow deals or use them to pay off cash flow deals. And then you own those. And then that rental income, let's say if you just own that outright, or a very low debt level. Let's say a very low debt level. Over time, your values and your rents will grow. Your debt will stay the same. So it will be devalued over time by that same inflationary number. So man, it's one of those things. You need the mix. And I'm not saying cash flow is king, but just as well as capital growth is not king. It's a diversified portfolio is absolutely key to achieving a long-term passive income result, which is effectively what everyone should be in the game for.
Everyone wants freedom, right? And
yes.
You've always said you can't eat your garage. Capital growth is not going to fund your lifestyle. And if you want to work for the next 30 years.
But the thing is as well, man, is like you need an income to release that equity. So you will stay tied to your job to pull equity out to live on. So it's like, well, what is the actual potential lifestyle change that'll ever come through? We nil, if anything. Like, yes, you might have another 50, 100 grand a year to play with, but ultimately, which might get you a nice holiday or maybe help you afford a better place to rent or something like that. But at the end of the day, man, you want low debt level, high yielding properties at the back end of your portfolio. So capital growth is king. It's like you need the mix. You need the diversity. Yes, we want to invest for capital growth as well and strong capital growth, but ultimately you want the mix to have a very diversified
All right,
portfolio.
nailed that one as well. One of your favorite ones, Sammy.
Here we go.
Buy and hold forever. One of your favorites.
Terrible strategy. Man, once a property's done its thing, it's the same thing as the inflationary piece. You hold a property for 10 years and it does nothing. It stays stagnant. The market dies off and it's had a great growth run. It stays and does nothing. Man, it's one of those things. It should be clipped once it finishes or hopefully right at the top of its cycle. Clipped, sold, profit banked, debt cleared. Same as what I discussed with the primary residence purchase that we spoke about last month. Man, in all reality, we want to make sure we are continually moving forward and banking profits and clearing debt and moving on. The idea of buying, holding forever. And I remember for ages, for years, I believed in the idea of holding for a double cycle because everyone said that's where you make the most money. But what if you could have 2, 3, 4 cycles in between its next run and then go and invest back in there when it's the right time to buy back in there? You got to treat your portfolio like a business. You got to treat every property like a business. Every property, is more like an employee, and in reality, or even a player on a sporting team. And man, in all reality, like if someone underperforms for a long period of time, you aren't going to keep them in the team, or you aren't going to keep them in your business. They're going to have a few great years, bank the profits of a few great years, move on.
Do you think this one comes around specifically because a lot of older people have always regretted selling a particular deal?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix between that and then that getting passed on and then people believing so wholeheartedly in it and having such a vehement approach to this is the only way to invest. You buy and you hold forever. It's just like, man, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like I'm an example of that with properties that I held me back. For some of them took me out of the market for a year. I think about my first unit. It took me out of the market for a year because it took me a year to sell it because I was emotionally tied to it. And that was the one property I was never going to sell. But selling it just completely changed my journey. So, man, I was a very low income earner. And if I hadn't sold it, it wouldn't have freed up borrowing. It wouldn't give me, I cleared over $200,000 worth of cash from it, cash profit. So yeah, man, it's one of those things that I believe it is. It's another uneducated comment by people who don't understand strategy. If anyone says buy and hold forever, mate, they've never retired from property or it took them 30, 40 years to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Nailed it again, Sammy boy. Next one. You can save tax with negative gearing.
Okay. As in,
so let's go and find negatively geared properties because, I don't want to pay tax.
All right. So
that's my focus.
Okay. So it as a focus or as a primary thing.
Yeah, it's a primary thing. I'm only going to buy negatively geared properties because my accountant said You got to save some tax. You're paying too much tax. Let's get some negatively geared properties.
Yeah, so saving taxes should never be a strategy. Look, if negative gearing in the current interest rate environment, which is obviously quite high, if it is a byproduct that allows you to write some tax off, then that's fine. You know, and obviously at the moment it's hard to get positively geared growth properties with interest rates as high as they are. But in all reality, man, it's not a strategy, and it's not something that someone should chase at all. It should be sometimes right now with growth properties, it's a byproduct of the current high interest rate environment that we're in. But it's not something that you should actively chase. I honestly don't care what income anyone's on. 250 grand a year, 500 grand a year, 5 million a year. I don't really care, because holding a property just to lose money and gain a little bit back in tax, it's not a strategy. Every day of the week, I'd prefer to go and buy something that's like, whether it's neutrally geared or even if it is negatively geared, that's fine, but it can't be the strategy. It's just got to be a byproduct of the asset that you've selected that fits into your overall game plan.
I stuffed this up for years.
Yeah.
Because I had the advice from my accountant.
Yeah.
No, you need a negatively geared property. You're paying too much in tax. But then obviously I couldn't borrow any more money to go and do anything.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
you're out of the game for 5 years.
I mean, did your has your accountant retired from property?
No, he was investing in shares. And I remember at the time thinking,
Great person to have advice
That's
from.
right.
Yeah.
And so you don't know any better in your early 30s. I'm thinking, shit, I need to change my account. And that was the first lesson of going down. And I remember an opportunity to invest in this particular fund. It was around property. He talked me out of it, and it did exceptionally well over the next few years. And I'm thinking, shit, I shouldn't have listened to this guy. Clearly, he wasn't in property. So
this is a hard thing, man. Like sometimes you take advice from people that you think would know better than you, but if they haven't done what you're trying to do, they're the incorrect person to take advice from.
Yeah, correct. This is a good lead into that point there, Sammy boy, because a lot of people think property is a rich man's game, and you need to be rich to invest in property.
Yeah, okay.
So you can't start if you don't have it, don't have any money. What's your thoughts?
I mean, if you don't have any money, yes, you can't start.
Of course.
But you definitely can get in like with a small deposit. You don't need to be a wealthy person to do it. All right, it took me 3 years to save my first deposit. Yes, wages are at a completely different level to what I was on back then. But like prices were. It was $275,000 was my first purchase. You can still buy properties out there in the 300,000s. There are still some asset classes, that I still believe are half decent to buy in that are in the 200,000s. They're becoming a lot more scarce, same as the 300,000s. But man, like if that is the absolute bare minimum that you have to get into a deal, then mate, it is what it is in terms of getting started. But man, it's still massively possible for someone to get in. And just to reiterate that point, 200s and 300s or even 400,000s, like the minimum wage is a lot higher than, $39,000 a year, which I was being paid back then. And most people out there laboring these days or, all these sorts of things are on like $80,000, $100,000 minimum at least, right? So comparatively, even if the property was twice as much, if I was making 30, let's call it 40 grand up to 40 grand a year. If you're making 80 grand a year now, probably similar in comparison time frame wise, instead of buying 275, like double 275 is 550. You can still buy properties in the 400s and obviously in the 500s as well. So it's one of those things, man. It is definitely still accessible. It's not a rich man's game. If anything, using property as a vehicle correctly can make you wealthy, and it should make you wealthy. But it's not something that will happen overnight if you are a lower income earner. So yeah, man, it's one of those things. It's definitely a fallacy that it needs to be a rich man's game, but I think it's all in relevancy to how long you're willing to stay committed to save that first deposit.
Yeah. I feel sorry for the people that listen or read some of the news articles, because some of those news articles that say, you need this kind of income in order to buy a property in Sydney or Melbourne. Yeah. And so it's reinforcing to those people, well, I don't earn enough. It is only a wealthy person's game.
Yeah, easy. So don't buy in that city on that income and rent where you want to live. Go back to the very first point. Rent where you want to live and invest where it makes sense.
100%. Moving on to the next one. Debt is bad. I'm going to pay off my house as quick as I possibly can. I don't want to get into debt. Dad said, mate, don't know the money, don't know the banks anything.
So it's always a mix, right? Debt is bad is a terrible comment. I don't know who said that. But it's always a mix between debt, right? There's good debt and there's bad debt. To me, good debt is income producing debt or debt that is used towards something that is going to appreciate in value. There is definitely bad debt being credit cards, personal loans, car loans, all that sort of shit, jet ski loans, all that sort of stuff. People get personal loans to go on holidays and stuff. Like, man, you should not be going on a holiday unless you've earned the right to do it. Let's be frank. Let's be direct. But good debt is going towards something like, let's say an investment property, and regardless of whether it actually produces an income, so to speak. Yes, it will have rental income, but what is it appreciating by every single year as well?
Yep.
And I think that's really, really important, because if you're putting it into that, man, and that is where your debt is going, then that's a positive. Now, the one misconception where people can get a little misconstrued is debt against your primary residence. Now, if it's holding you back from building a property portfolio, then I believe it is bad debt. I genuinely believe it's bad debt. And you got to remember, the banks don't look at your asset. They don't look at your primary residence as an asset. They look at it as a liability. It's a non-income producing debt that is an anchor to you to being able to borrow more money. So you have to distinguish what point you are in your journey. And same as we spoke about, a month ago when we were talking about, myself buying that primary residence. It was the right time in my journey and where I was in my 15 and a half years of bloody investing to buy that primary residence. But man, beyond that, it's one of those things, man. It will 100% be an anchor. And so you need to understand, for full clarity, I've still taken on a level of debt to buy my primary residence, but it's at a 30, 40% LVR. So I'm taking on debt to not exhaust all my capital, but I'm also using a lot of my capital to keep my debt on the primary residence lower than just doing it at, say, an 80% LVR. And that enables me, for one, it leaves me a nice big chunk of cash that I can still use to go and invest. But yeah, man, also doesn't like smash my serviceability crazily by, comparatively with what I've got.
And don't you think that people's relationship with debt changes over time? Like initially, you're obviously quite fearful of debt, but as you get more confident and comfortable in seeing what it's actually going to do for you, your relationship changes, your tolerance changes, and your capacity changes. And you start realizing the benefits of it.
So I think a couple of weeks ago, the episode came out with David Harwood, and his wife Alicia, and what they've built and what they started out and doing. And I remember when I first spoke to them about building a multi-property portfolio and undoubtedly taking on another few $1 million worth of debt, they were so nervous, man. And I get it from almost every client that I've worked with that has built something substantial within property. And when they first start out, like, we never talk about building a massive portfolio and we walk it out a little bit, but we want to focus on the first deal, 2 deals to get them, to get the mojo going, get the confidence built as well. But if you dive into the fact of, mate, to build a $5 million portfolio, you're probably going to need to take on $3 to $4 million worth of debt. You tell them that for investment, not for their own home. Like for their own home, people can probably stomach it a bit more. But for investments, people get very scared of that. Understandably so. $3 to $4 million of debt's not a small amount of debt, but it's properly managing it and treating it like a business as well. And I think this is the thing. Like, you also can't get to that without, like we were talking about before, treating the portfolio like a business, selling properties at the right time.
Isn't it funny you just said that? Because
injecting cash flow as required.
Yeah. I was just thinking the educated person would be so much more scared by $3 million of debt on your primary place of residence. Because I'm thinking, shit, where's the income coming from to pay for that? I'm going to have to work my ass off to pay for that. So your relationship changes over time.
And to be clear as well, like the debt that I've left on my primary residence that obviously I still haven't settled on, the debt that I have left on that is being covered by my property portfolio. The passive income that I've generated from the property portfolio. You remember the 30 odd deals that I'm in the process of selling off. They're all high growth assets that have done their thing. They've all had an exceptional run. And most of them have actually seen a lot of rental growth as well. Like a lot of them have gone close to doubling with rents, 10% yields on a lot of them. 8, 9, 10, 12% yields on bread and butter deals that have doubled. But they're single key investments and they were there for growth. And a lot of them I've also pulled debt out of as well to keep scaling the portfolio. So it's always a mix, man. And so often clearing that out and then repurposing it, man. It's just so much more powerful.
Yeah, perfect. This next one is something that we've been told, and there was actually, I remember a TV show, Location. Do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
So
I actually
location.
got hit up to potentially go on the next season.
No way.
Just recently.
Did you really?
Yeah, but they're wanting like an owner BA, and I was like, yeah, that ain't me.
That's not you. So what would you say to people? And there are buyer's agents out there spruiking that as long as you get the location right, you're all sweet.
I think it goes back to like capital growth is king. It's a very similar sort of statement. Being purely about location. Location is hyper important. Like it's one of the most important things that you will do when you buy an asset, whether it's for cash flow, for growth, or whatever it is. So it's actually very, very important. But it isn't everything. And the strategy piece has to come in first, which then ties into location. So I think that's really, really important. Because like to say location is to say that like, well, as long as it's in like the best location, it's going to perform. Like pretty much just saying that. But like, let's drill that down. Are we talking about, the nicest suburbs in Australia, or are we talking about location being specific to the best growth locations in Australia? So I think it's being very clear with your strategy. What do you need out of each specific property? And then obviously applying that to what you're trying to do as well.
Yeah, spot on. We're flying through these, which is awesome.
Beautiful.
The next one, one of your good mates often says this: blue chip properties always go up in value.
I don't have any mates that say that. Let's be clear. I don't have any mates that say anything.
I thought it was a good mate of yours.
Okay.
Focus on blue chip. Don't worry about the blue collar. Okay. Blue chip is where it's at. Is that any comments on that?
Show me someone that's. I'll just say, show me someone that's retired in a decent time frame that's only focused on blue chip. It goes the same vein of owning property forever. Man, I don't mind blue chip for certain asset classes or certain things you might do in your portfolio. Blue chip for developing makes heaps of sense if you got the pockets deep enough to play in that space
and expertise, right? You get burnt quick.
But ultimately, yes, for sure. I mean, we had dinner with someone very experienced who got burnt developing in blue chip. Even though blue chip can be a great space to, if you're going to develop, you want to develop in the top end of town. It's the biggest margins, the biggest gains out of a singular deal. Gains, all for the gains. But yeah, man, blue chip, it's one of those things. It's too cash flow intensive, right? It kills your journey too quickly. Yes, if you have good growth, like let's say a market goes through strong growth, your blue chip areas might grow by 70, 80%, but your blue collars might do 100, 120% because they're more affordable, there's more heat, more people can afford it. You can't really trade when things get no longer affordable. You can't really trade up, like you can only trade down. And when markets sort of start outpacing people, so many of your renters try and jump in, but where they jump in the bottom mid end of the market. A lot of the time they can't afford the top end. So, man, I'm not like massively against it. It's just like it's not the primary focus.
Yeah.
The primary focus should be selecting the correct assets in the correct location at the right price that are going to perform for you personally. And just like, it's a minute portion of the country of investors that can afford in blue chip and continue to invest. Yeah. So it's just way too blanket an approach and a comment to actually be relevant.
Yeah. I've always thought about it in that, and learning from you, like, would you rather have one or two blue chip assets over a 10-year period or 10 different properties? And I'm thinking, well, the cumulative effect of the 10 definitely is going to outweigh the 2, but also the choices that you're going to have from those 10. I can either keep 3, I can sell off 7, I can leverage into these other ones, I can sell down, I've got more exits, I've got more options. Yeah. So I've always thought...
better cash flow.
Yeah, better cash flow. So, I mean, at the end of the day, as investors, you want to stack the deck, you want to have choice. So that Hail Mary pass with 1 or 2, to me, just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, dude, this is the thing. It's like, it's not a Hail Mary, right? Because like, you're limiting your options and you're limiting your levers. You're talking about the 10 properties versus the 2. Man, you've got 10 levers. And when I say levers, like, they could be things you could sell, things you could renovate, things you could value out, all the rest of the sort of thing as well. So I think it's one of those things, man. It's like, it's understanding what you're trying to get out of the game, but ultimately, like, the blue chip piece typically comes in the same vein as like you buy and hold forever, because it's like, it's a long-term strategy. I don't believe in obviously, our strategies are built around trying to get a result over the long term, but I don't believe in just buying and holding and praying for a property to do its thing over the long term. Like, it needs to be a specific strategy, not just like, it always goes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, mate,
which is false.
We're nearing the end here.
Beautiful.
I'm curious on your take around the education space in property.
Okay.
Because it seems to have blown up of late in the last 5 years, right? Everyone's coming out, everyone's got a course, or the way people have been taught things and told things. What's your thoughts about this? Because the market is getting saturated with people telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, man, I think it's very simple. Has the person that you're taking advice from or learning from done what you want to do from the position that you're in? And that's really, really important, because if they're giving you advice after building a, $10 million property portfolio, but when they started their business, before giving advice, they had 1 or 2 or none, they're not the right person, because it's not relevant to your position, your situation. If that person built a sizable portfolio in the same position you're in before they maybe started an education, course, platform, whatever it is, or BA or whatever it is, then, man, like, that makes sense, because they've been in your shoes, so they understand what you're going to come up against and help you navigate that piece. Man, I think, but to reiterate one point, I believe education is absolutely key. Without being an educated investor, you can't make educated decisions to really build something significant. And let's be direct here. You need to be very educated to build a sizable portfolio that's going to replace the sort of passive income that you want to achieve and buy the dream primary residence in time as well. So education is absolutely key. It's who is it coming from, and what have they done relevant to you? Like, is it starting from the same position and building what you want to do on your income, or is it a completely different story? And it's important to like verify that stuff because so much of it is a fugazi. You know, so much of it is a fugazi. And you need to understand, have they been in your shoes? Because if they haven't, then they likely aren't going to be able to help you get to where you want to go.
You can't really pick holes in those people unless you're more educated. And that's the great thing I love about the School of Property students or APS members is that whenever they start having conversations with anyone, their knowledge base is just so much higher that they will never get ripped off by anyone because they're going to see through all the bullshit. And they're going to be more educated than 99.9% of the investors out there. So education is so key. The other thing, not only I want to talk about the educators, what about the circle of influence? Because we talk about circle of influence a lot. If you're getting advice from an educator, but what about, your mum and dad, your brother, your cousin, Uncle Joe? Everyone's got an opinion on what you should be doing. The same thing applies, right? If they haven't done what you're doing, why are you taking the advice from mum and dad?
I would honestly block out the noise, anything to do with that. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is allowing a lot of people to fill your head with their opinions, which may not be, it might be well-meaning, but if they haven't done what you want to do, then like they're not the right people to take advice from. I ran into a personal scenario recently, and I just found I was kind of talking to people about it and asking people's opinions. And then my head got filled with everyone's fucking opinions, and you feel good about one thing and then you feel bad and good and bad and good and bad. And you're on this emotional roller coaster. It's no different with investing. You should really only listen to and take advice from people who have done what you want to do. And if they haven't, man, you need to block it out. And the easiest way to block it out, it's hard because you want to talk to people about your problems or your dreams or your ambitions or anything like that. But the biggest issue is talking to people who haven't achieved those same dreams or goals or ambitions or aren't on the same journey as you trying to achieve them. And this is important because if you have people that are trying to achieve it as well, then that's really good to have a sounding board, a similar sounding board, of those style of people, so you can, share the journey and stay motivated with it as well. And things are going to pop up, so you need to have someone to talk to. But it's important not to speak to a heap of different people who haven't been through it or aren't going through it, because if you're speaking to those, they're just going to give you, especially if they're people that care about you, they're going to give you the well-meaning conservative approach that might make you stop in your journey. Or deviate from strategy, all those sorts of things as well. But it's really important to hold the course and only work with people who've done what you want to do, and only speak to people, not that are just like blindly giving, blind faith, but people who are giving you constructive, feedback or constructive opinion around it, that's non-biased and that, hopefully has some good education-backed premise behind it as well, if that makes sense.
Even your brokers and your accountants, right?
They've got to be the right. And your team's got to have done what you want to do.
Yeah, because it just reminded me, and the reason why I put like the finance bit I want to talk about just to wrap it up is I was speaking to this particular client, and I've said, look, you need to have the right person who's advising you, and he goes, no, I'm going to use mum and dad's broker because they've worked with him for a long time. And I said, okay, well, how many properties has your mum and dad bought? Oh, they've only got a couple of properties. And I was like, okay, so has this broker built out a large investment portfolio? He's like, I'm not too sure, but I trust what mum and dad said. And I was like, trying to give this kid some education around that. So just wrap up on that around finance and like the banks and, well, actually I want to talk to you about the banks in a sec, because this same kid was talking about only using the major banks too.
You need a school of property, man. It's as simple as that, right? Because like, he's taking the opinion of someone who hasn't done what he wants to do, both the broker and his parents. Like, okay, it sounds like, if this kid's in his 20s, let's say he's in his 20s, his parents are undoubtedly in their 40s or their 50s. He realistically has the potential to be retired before them if he follows the correct strategy, if he uses the correct team, if he gets the right education around him as well. And in all reality, man, like this is the whole point, both of the Scouting Australia podcast, but obviously also of School of Property. It's to arm people with the knowledge on how to actually do this thing and build it out. So yeah, man, I think it's one of those things. You have to be so careful who you take your advice from. And in all reality, man, like this kid sounds like he's just trying to be a good kid, follow the advice of, his parents who've probably done okay, or they're just like, well-meaning and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, man, if they haven't done what he wants to do, they're not the right people to take advice from. Again, they're probably really well-meaning and trying to look after him and help him. And the broker probably is as well. But fuck, if the broker hasn't been through it, then man, it's just like, it's non-consequential. It's not the right person to take advice from. I almost stayed with my accountant, who was my family accountant for like 20 years. I would have been in the hole $54,000 on my first sale because they didn't know the strategic piece around tax that I did. Lucky that I did, that I educated myself around it to save myself 54 grand.
Back then.
And dude, I went to like 5 or 6 different accountants before I finally found the accountant I'm with now, who was like, yeah, man, you're 100% right. And like, this is what we do. Bang, 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 bang. Yeah, it's this. And I think I actually thought it was a little bit less. He actually got me more of a discount off my tax, which is post-tax. So I had something in the 40s or whatever it was, and he had me 54 grand post-tax, right? Which is the equivalent to probably 70 grand a year as an income. And if I'd just taken her advice, for one, we wouldn't be sitting here. Like in all reality, we probably wouldn't be sitting here because I wouldn't have then figured out all the other pieces because I'd met someone that's done what I want to do.
100%.
That was feeding me the advice, which is what I needed to do what I ended up doing, what I am doing now.
100%, mate. I love it. We focused on a fast 30 and we've just hit 35 minutes, Sammy boy.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to mention? Because I think we've covered a lot of the little tips about the myths or the things that we've been taught.
No, man, I think this is good. We've been rapping
just
through.
wanted to punch through them.
Yeah, we've been punching through, the questions that are the most asked by the clients and by the listeners, that they struggle the most with, or that they bring to the table as genuine queries, but things that we wanted to bust. Did you say you had one more left around banks? Around the banks?
Well, it was really, the banks, right? There is a big misconception that the major banks are the safest, and you should never use any of the second or third tier lenders because they're risky.
Yeah.
Right? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the same comment as before around like we wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't used found the accountant that I did and the broker that I did, and it'd be the same thing if I never used second and third tier lenders. Like, yeah, man, I wouldn't have gotten past 7 or 8 properties, right? Like it's a I say necessary evil, but it's just the next step on the ladder. Using second and third tier lenders, it's just part of it. Like, no worries if you want to start with a mainstream to start. A lot of us do. A lot of clients do start with mainstreams to start. Mainstream lenders being like your big 4 or your really well-known brands. But your second and third tier lenders, man, they're a necessary, born in the game of chess that is property that you need to embrace to keep building your portfolio. And then there's people who like swore they would never use it, and then they're taking out debt, and when interest rates were the highest level in like the 8%, because they knew that was what was needed, and it was a cost of doing business to pay an extra 1% higher. But they were able to do another 2, 3, 4 deals, something like that. Now, if you look at the compounded return of like, let's say you'd done that in Perth and you were capped out after, say, you finished investing in Brisbane or Adelaide, and then you're about to go into Perth, and you're like, oh, I don't have any money, with the mainstreams, I've got to go second tier lenders. If you hadn't bought, man, you probably missed out on, $300,000, $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 properties that all doubled or more, because you were paying an extra 1% in interest. And now that may have been 2 or 3 properties. So across 2 or 3 properties for an extra 1% in interest, you might have been paying an extra 10 grand a year in interest over $1 million worth of debt. But each of those properties would have doubled. So for the cost of 10 grand, let's say with $1 million worth of debt, $1.2 million worth of property, you would have made at least $1 million worth of growth in that time frame, if not more, for the sake of $10,000.
It's crazy.
You know what I mean? It's a 100x return. Like it's an absolute no-brainer to utilize those things, man. So I understand their hesitation around it. I had it as well when I was young. I was like, oh, no, what's this? I'm not paying that rate, or I'm not doing this or that or whatever. But you've got to realize that your portfolio is a business, and debt and accessing debt is a massive part of that. And you just got to embrace it.
Yeah.
You just got to embrace it.
It's been interesting with the journey with you and using people, your broker. I've worked with banks I never even knew existed. I remember the broker coming to me, we're going to go with this person. I was like, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
Like, just at the end of the day, if they're going to give you the money, and if you think about it logically, if you want what 99% of people don't have, then you are going to have to think outside the box. And a lot of the conventional banks are very one-dimensional. They just want the cookie cutter, easy, mum and dad, buy your own home. So if you want something different, you do need to stretch and you think outside the box.
For sure, man. No, I couldn't agree more.
Mate, I think we've absolutely nailed it, Sammy. We wanted a snappy one.
Mate,
we wanted to be quick and snappy.
This is beautiful.
You did well. You nailed it.
Thank you.
Hopefully for all of our young investors out there, or no matter where you are,
young and old,
if you're starting your journey.
Don't take yourself out of the equation, Jim.
If you're starting your journey, question the things that you've been taught by everyone. And you can't question it if you're not educated. So get educated.
Get educated, question it, be curious, grow, learn.
I love it.
Beautiful. Jimmy.
Let's wrap it up.
Beautiful. Mate, thank you so much for coming in, punching in the questions from yourself and from big Mr. Brendan Gagan and big Liam as well. Mate, thank you for joining me in the studio today. Listeners, I hope you took some great value from today's episode. We were short, we were sharp, we banged out a bulky myth-busting episode. I hope you took some great value. If you did, as always, please make sure you send it on to someone else who maybe is talking this garbage that is these myths. Please send it on to either them or other people you think would take some great value out of this episode. And until next week, guys, that's another Scouting Australia podcast.